Storytime. Hey, less secret, Jenny.
Hey, visible Katie. Hello.
You look so cozy.
I'm always cozy because I've got my nest. You look adorable.
I'm gonna put my pajamas on.
Oh. I'm just boiling the kettle. That's if you can hear that background noise. As of Friday this week, I am officially like fully immune, and I can do a hairdresser's appointment without a test. So
Hooray!
I'm gonna chop it off.
All of it?
Not all of it, but a lot of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Mike.
Hello. Hey, hey.
Also fluffy.
Katie, I was going to say, I love your colour combination today. That was a lovely green.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. More colours. How many layers have you got? Are you like a Russian doll? Just keeps going.
I am like a Russian doll, but this is me run out of layers, so I will stay off camera.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh.
How are you, Bracken?
Doing good. Yeah. Went around to some people's houses today and gave them
fantastic.
cake. We've had several like lateral flow tests since the thing, and I'm fully vaccinated now. So
Awesome. That's cool. Yeah.
we gave some cake to people who had been helping out at the protest.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
Food Not Bombs gave like a bunch of food and stuff. So like gave people lunches basically for the middle of the day, which was really nice.
Yeah. That's lovely. Yeah. So how's all that organised? How's it all organised?
Our previous organisation, like there are lots of places in like around the world that have Food Not Bombs. It's like you just give out food for free in places around the world. And the Glasgow branch has been around for a wee while. Rory has been like working with them since January. So they had all of the resources already. They get like a lot of free food from like supermarkets and stuff, like nearly out of date stuff, and it's all vegan. Like they do a really nice like vegan spicy mac and cheese. Love that shit.
Katie's face then. Oh. Oh. That looks cozy. Oh, look at the snuggle on that.
It's cozy. It's also covered with like a year's worth of little tiny bits of thread from all my sewing.
Oh, it's like a memory jumper.
And also, flour and everything else.
Lots of baking things.
All the baking things.
Where did we leave off the story on Friday?
I haven't been listening.
I think just before the
I just come for the pre-chat.
Just before it was announced to the new captain.
Okay, so we don't know who the new captain is yet.
I've read the book before and I can't remember for the life of
me. Me too.
Lyric, what poetry books did you get?
Oh, I haven't bought them yet. I'm gonna go tonight.
Cool.
Yes.
Because Katie and I were discussing our poetry splurges earlier.
I missed the poetry splurge chat.
No, it was by text earlier. Katie, lots of things.
Do you tell?
I bought the Poetry Pharmacy, both the Poetry Pharmacies.
Oh, I love that. Good call.
What other poetry?
Wild Embers and The Sound of Hope, which is Nikita Gill's new book.
Oh,
and pharmacies.
I don't know. Lyric has them and Andrada has them, and they both rave about them.
So there's this dude named William Seahart, and his buddy Jenny something, who edits poetry books and runs festivals and shit, was like, hey, so you're gonna do this thing at this festival, and people are gonna come tell you about their problems, and you're gonna prescribe a poem for them.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was like, yeah, all right, sure, that sounds fine. And then it turned into a concept for a collection. So for every poem, there's a prescription page with like a general diagnosis and then alternative diagnoses, and then a little bit about why it typically ends up meaning a lot to people and why it was put in there.
Oh, I need that.
Oh.
Why am I studying medicine? I couldn't end our poetry books.
Oh.
It sounds so cute.
It's really nice.
And how are you, Jenny? I haven't seen you for ages.
I'm okay, like
Good.
studying again, which is annoying because it's been going on for too long, but I passed the written exam. So
Oh, that's amazing. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Congrats!
So
That's really cool.
now it's just like, I was like 100% sure that I passed, but I'm really happy that I got a B as well, which I didn't expect.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
Also,
But-
Michael, did you hear the news about like Jenny got cast in a play?
No.
just kidding.
No,
I
what?
got cast as Lady Macbeth this after I'm done studying. I'm gonna do my last theatre play in Freedom.
That's
So to say
amazing.
before-
Well done. That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's my usual theatre company that I already used to play with, and they've got an open air stage, so it's pretty
Oh.
sure that it'll happen, whatever happens corona-wise. So it's like, yeah.
That'd be brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. Have you played that role before?
No, but I'm really excited. I read the book in school and I've seen the play in at least one rendition. So I'm really excited about that. I think Lady Macbeth is like so cool. Such a cool role. I mean, she's horrible, obviously, but horrible people are the coolest to play. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's why Frankie loved reading Zosie so much. I think.
exactly. Yeah. And I also, Macbeth, the guy who plays Macbeth is a friend of mine who I've played with before. Who I always seem to be in family relations with. Like the first time we played together, he was my brother-in-law, then he was my dad, and now he's my husband.
Oh, what a nice way to wrap it up, you know?
Oh.
Yeah.
Hello.
We've got an Alan. A straight in Alan.
Oh, I'm Frankie. Hello, Alan.
How you doing?
Alan, yeah.
A wild Alan appeared.
Wild Alien. Like Wild Stallions.
Singular. I've evolved to singular Alan. Yeah.
This is tasty.
Yeah.
Sabina's making crumble. Crumble? What are you making?
I'm making a sticky rhubarb and ginger.
Oh, sticky rhubarb and ginger cake.
Ooh, yes,
Sorry.
please.
Weird.
Saw rhubarb and assumed crumble.
I feel like that's just an even better option. Shit, I've never had a sticky rhubarb and ginger cake, and I would like that in my mouth, please.
I love it that sticky is in the name already. Like,
I'm gonna bring it on camera.
I was going to wave it around in front of your camera, but
Yeah, go on, come and wave it around over here.
you've got your one.
I just caught the tail end of that, Frankie.
Oh, Martin is currently eating a pomegranate chocolate mousse that he was proposing to come and wave around on camera, but
Yes.
hasn't
Oh,
said
that's what he
that-
wants to wave around on camera.
Yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, I am. We have a very exciting thing happening tonight.
We do.
We have a guest. We have a guest. We've had a dinner guest.
Ooh.
Does
As if I would.
Okay, I was gonna ask if they happen to have some extremely cool hair.
Fashion!
Oh, hey, hey.
Oh, y'all look so nice.
You
Here they
exist
are.
with normal lighting.
Yeah, no bisexual lighting to be seen.
Sure.
In the bisexuality another.
Well, I didn't know that was where the evening was going.
That's Acton. First, bisexuality later. Everyone knows that.
Come for the story. Stay for the...
Bisexuality.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the lighting. Oh.
Hilarious.
Straightforward from sex.
You folks. How are y'all doing?
Oh wow.
Better now that there's a sideways
Hey,
unit.
Lisa. Hey, Jonas. Hey, little baby Ash.
Hey, Jonas. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Ash. How's that treating you?
Mhm.
Hi.
Mhm. I had a bit of a moment over here.
Sorry. I'll give you your privacy. Sean's having chocolate mousse. It's the Storytime chocolate mousse.
Speaking of desserts,
Very nice time.
before we run out of time, can I show you something? A novelty cake that was delivered to me today for no particular reason.
We're going to have to tilt the camera more than the cake, okay?
Okay.
Oh, I see it's a novelty cake.
Yes. Join me.
Yay!
Yeah, I think it must have been the wrong address or something. I don't know what that's about, fellow citizens.
That is amazing. That's so cool.
I can't imagine you arm wrestling a band there.
I find this one.
Yes.
We're just going to sit and erotically eat mousse the entire time that Frankie's reading. I hope that that's okay.
Yes.
And it's
Do
not
you have
my
enough
watch.
moves?
It's erotica. Night from Night Watch. And I'm reading Delta of Venus to you.
I mean, just read that watch, but really sexily.
Yeah. What you mean, even sexier than I usually do it?
Turn it up to 20.
Or just do Nobby Nobs' voice the whole time.
Both would do it for us.
Katie, what is on your delicious looking spoon?
Chocolate mousse.
Is it? Moose twins. Also, Katie, your hair is looking incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Cute.
Look how gorgeous it is. It's so curly and nice.
I think that you might need your backing singers.
Ah, ba 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 beep ba do ba do ba dee addy ba dee dee ba ba da ba.
Storytime.
Yeah.
I'm great backing singer.
What a Destiny's Child moment.
That was.
It looked like the Muppets in, Mana Mana. I was waiting for you guys.
Okay. Fortifying sip of water. Mm.
Do you want to cut it?
No, you do it.
Mutual.
Please carry it.
So quiet and good you are. Okay. This is so exciting. I have an audience. I mean, like a, audience in addition to my boyfriend. Are you sitting comfortably? Sitting comfortably. Then I'll begin. He turned his back and hurried away so that the man wouldn't see his face. Okay, now it was time. It had to be now, or he'd burst like Mr. Salsiferous. He'd wanted to do this, hadn't dared try it, because those monks could probably do a man a lot of no good if he crossed them, but it had all gone too far now. A sense of duty told him there was an officer waiting to see him. He overruled it. It was not in possession of all the facts. Vimes reached the entrance to the watch house and stopped. He shut his eyes. If anyone had bothered to look at him, they'd have seen a man apparently trying to grind 2 cigarette stubs into the road, one with each foot. Thank you, Rosie, for those cardboard souls. He smiled. He thought with the brains in his feet. And as young Sam had noticed, the feet had a memory of their own. Rounded cat head cobbles, the usual kind. They hadn't been well set in this part of the city and moved very slightly underfoot. Then, twice before getting to the watch house, his feet had felt larger cobbles, narrow bands of them, where the road surface had been replaced after drains had been laid. And before that, there'd been a similar band, but of soft brick rubble, so crushed by cartwheels that it was practically a gully. A few steps earlier, they'd twirled him round a couple of times, but the last surface before that had been mud. Vimes, who had been walking with his eyes shut, bumped into a cart. Mud, he thought, getting up and ignoring the strange looks of passers-by. That meant an alley. Let's see. Ah, yes, over there. It took 20 minutes. People turned as he walked through the streets, closing his eyes when he dared so that his feet could see better. Sometimes he did look around, though, and there it was again, the thunderstorm sensation of tensions building up, waiting for the first little thing. People were uneasy, the herd was restless, and they didn't quite know why. Everyone he looked at returned his gaze blankly. He stepped onwards. Rough flagstones between 2 stretches of the ancient cobbles called trollheads. The only place where you got that in this part of the city was here, where Pewter Street crossed Elm. And before that it had been, big stones, some of the most ancient in the city, rutted by hundreds and hundreds of years of iron-bound cartwheels. That was a road that had been right behind a city wall. Yes. He crossed the pits, still on Elm, and then lost his thread. A metal grating on the pavement gave it back to him. Cellar grating. Cool cellar. Coat of arms on it, worn down. Butter market. Yeah, go feet. The monks had turned him again here, but long bricks, hard-fired in the kiln, and a stretch of quite modern flagstones, well-dressed and fitted. It could trick you if you didn't know you were in, Mason's Road. And there were masons here, and they looked after the surface. Now find an alley, mud, but with a lot of gravel in it, because the stonemasons dumped their waste here, but this one has occasional hummocks across it, where pipes have been laid. Yeah. Now find square-head cobbles. He opened his eyes. Yeah. Away on his left, on Clay Lane, was a box of 3 buildings. A temple sandwiched between 2 cheapjack corner shops. It was just a temple. Slightly foreign looking, but weren't they all? It looked high Hublandish, where everyone lived on yaks or something. The temple doors were locked. He rattled the handle impotently and then hammered on the woodwork with his sword. It had no effect. He didn't even leave a mark on the wood. But the door of the shonky shop next door was open. It was a familiar place. Once upon a time, it was his tailor and bootmaker. And, like a pawn shop, a shonky shop was always open. Vimes stepped inside and was immediately enveloped in dusty darkness. It was a cave of cloth. Racks of old suits hung from the ceiling. Ancient shelves bent under piles of shirts and vests and socks. Here and there, old boxes loomed in the gloom and caught his knees. Piles of derelict boots slipped and slid under his feet. And there was the smell. If poverty had a smell, this was it. If humbled pride had a smell, this was it. And there was a touch of disinfectant as well. Within a few feet of the door, Vimes was already lost. He turned and shoved his way through grey aisle after grey aisle of suffocating cloth, and wondered if anyone had ever died in here and how anyone could ever find out. He pulled aside a hanger containing a greasy, threadbare suit. "You want?" He turned. There was no one there, until his gaze fell slightly and met that of a small, glossy little man, totally bald, very small and thin, and wearing some vague clothing that presumably even a shonky shop hadn't been able to unload on a customer. Who was he? Who was he? Surprisingly, the name seemed quite fresh in the memory. Yeah, Mr. Shine. Soonshine's son, said Mr. Soon. He grabbed the suit Vimes was still holding. Good eye, good eye. Lovely cloth, lovely cloth. Owned by priest, very good. 50 pence to you. Shame to sell it. Times are hard. Vimes hastily put the suit back on the rack and pulled out his badge. Soon glared at it. I pay already other copper, he said. $1 1 month, no trouble. Already I pay other copper. Pay, said Vimes. 2 stripe copper, already I pay. $1 1 month, no trouble. Corporal Quirk, muttered Vimes. You don't have to pay coppers, Mr. Soon. We're here for your protection. Despite his barely basic grasp of the language, Mr. Soon's expression suggested very clearly that the 3-stripe 1 crown copper in front of him had dropped in from the planet Idiot. Look, I haven't got time for this, said Vimes. Where's the back door? This is watch business. I pay protection. 1 month, no trouble. Vimes grunted and set off along another narrow, cloth-lined tunnel. A glint of glass caught his eye, and he sidled crabwise up a choked aisle until he found a counter. It was piled with more hopeless merchandise, but there was a bead-curtained doorway behind it. He half-clambered, half-swam over the piles and scrambled into the tiny room beyond. Mr. Soon pushed his way to an ancient tailor's dummy. It was so scratched, chipped and battered it looked like something dug up from the volcanic ash of an ancient city. He pulled on an arm, and the eyes lit up. "Number 3 here," he said into its ear. "He's just gone through. And boy, is he angry." The back door was locked, but yielded under the weight of Vimes's body. He staggered into the yard, looked up at the wall separating this greasy space from the temple's garden, jumped, scrabbled his boots on the brickwork and dragged himself onto the top, feeling a couple of bricks crumble away underneath him. He landed on his back and looked up at a thin, robed figure sitting on a stone seat. "Cup of tea, Commander?" said Sweeper cheerfully. "I don't want any damn tea," shouted Vimes, struggling to his feet. Sweeper dropped a lump of rancid yak butter in the tea bowl beside him. "What do you want then, Mr. Vimes, with the very helpful feet?" "I can't deal with this. You know what I mean." "You know, some tea really would calm you down," said Sweeper. "Don't tell me to be calm. When are you going to get me home?" a figure stepped out of the temple. He was a taller, heavier man than Sweeper, white-haired and with the look of a good-natured bank manager about him. He held out a cup. Vimes hesitated a moment, and then took the cup and poured the tea out onto the ground. "I don't trust you," he said. "There could be anything in this." "I can't imagine what we could put in tea that would make it any worse than the way you normally drink it," said Sweeper calmly. "Sit down, Your Grace. Please." Vimes sagged onto the seat. The rage that had been driving him sank a little too, but he could feel it bubbling. Automatically, he pulled out a half-smoked cigar and put it in his mouth. "Sweeper said you'd find us some way or another," said the other monk, and sighed. "So much for secrecy." "Why should you worry?" said Vimes, lighting the stub. "You can just play around with time and it won't have happened, right?" "We don't intend to do that," said the other monk. "What could I do, anyway? Go around telling everyone that those loony monks you see in the streets are some kind of time shifters? I'll get locked up. Who are you, anyway?" "This is Q," said Sweeper, nodding at the other monk. "When the time comes, he'll get you back. But not yet." Vimes sighed. The anger had drained, leaving only a hopeless, empty feeling. He stared blankly at the strange rockery that occupied most of the garden. It looked oddly familiar. He blinked. "I've been talking to people today who are going to die," he said. "How do you think that makes me feel? Do you know what that feels like?" The monks gave him a puzzled look. Yes, said Q. "We do," said Sweeper. "Everyone we talk to is going to die. Everyone you talk to is going to die. Everyone dies." "I've been changing things," said Vimes, and added defensively, "Well, why shouldn't I? Carcer is. I have no idea how things are going to turn out. I mean, doesn't it change history even if you just tread on an ant?" "For the ant, certainly," said Q. Sweeper waved a hand. "I told you, Mr. Vimes. History finds a way. It's like a shipwreck. You're swimming to the shore. The waves will break whatever you do. Is it not written, the big sea does not care which way the little fishes swim? People die in their due time. Kale didn't. Carcer mugged the poor devil." "His due time in this present, Commander," said Q. "But he will play his part in the other one, Mr. Vimes. Eventually. You'll reach the shore. You must. Otherwise, there's no shore," said Sweeper. "No," said Vimes. "There's got to be more. I'm not swimming, I'm drowning. It was fun, do you know? At first, like a boys' night out, feeling the street under my boots again. But now, what about Sybil? Are my memories real? What I know is that she's a girl living with her dad. Is there somewhere where she's my wife, having my child? I mean, really? Is it all in my mind? Can you prove it? Is it happening? What will it happen? What is real?" The monks were silent. Sweeper glanced at Q, who shrugged. He glanced rather more meaningfully, and this time Q made that dismissive little wave of the hand, which is someone signifying, all right, against my better judgment. Then Sweeper said, "Yes," very slowly. "Yes, I think we can help Commander. You want to know there's a future waiting. You want to hold it in your hand. You want to feel the weight of it. You want one point to navigate by, one point to steer for. Yes. I think we can help you there. But, yes. But you climb back over that wall and Sergeant Keel plays his part. He sees it through to the end. He gives the orders he feels are right, and they will be the right orders. He holds the line. He does the job. He's not the only one, said Vimes. Yes, Commander Vimes has a job in hand too. Don't worry, I'm not leaving Casa behind, growled Vimes. Good. We'll be in touch. Vimes tossed the stub of his cigar aside and looked up at the wall. All right, he said. I'll see it through. But when the time comes, we will be ready, said Sweeper. Just so long as you... He stopped. There was another subtle sound, scaly in its way, a sort of silicon slither. My goodness, said Q. Vimes looked down. The cigar butt still smouldered. But around it, the garden of inner city tranquility was moving, pebbles sliding over tiny pebble. A large, water-rounded rock floated gently around, spinning. And then Vimes became aware that the whole garden was spinning, turning on the little wisp of smoke. A spent match sailed past, rolling from stone to stone like a scrap of food passed from ant to ant. Is it meant to do that? He said. In theory, yes, said Sweeper. I should leave right now, Mr. Vimes. Vimes took one last look at the moving garden, shrugged, and then heaved himself over the wall. The two monks stared. The tide of little stones was gently pushing the stub into the centre. Astonishing, said Q. He's part of the pattern now. I don't know how you manage it. I'm not doing it, said Sweeper. Q, can we? No more time shifting, said Q. It's caused enough trouble. Fair enough, said Sweeper. Then I'll need to send out search parties. The fences, the bent jewellers, the pawn shops. We'll find it. I understand, our friend. The job's not enough. He needs one real thing. And I know what it is. They looked again at the turning, shifting garden and felt the fingers of history spreading out and into the world. Vimes tried not to run back to the watch house because too many people were standing around in nervous groups, and even a running uniform could be risky. Besides, you didn't run for officers. He was a sergeant. Sergeants walked with a measured tread. To his mild surprise, the men were still out in the yard. Someone had even hung up the swordsmanship targets, which would certainly be helpful if the watchmen were faced with an enemy who was armless and tied to a pole. He climbed the stairs. The captain's door was open, and he saw that the new man had repositioned his desk so that he could see out onto the landing and down the stairs. Not a good sign. Not a good sign at all. An officer shouldn't see what was going on. He should rely on his sergeants to tell him what was going on. That way things ran smoothly. This man was keen. Oh dear. The new captain looked up. Oh, good grief, Vimes thought. It's bloody Rust this time round. And it was indeed the Honourable Ronald Rust, the god's gift to the enemy, any enemy, and a walking encouragement to desertion. The Rust family had produced great soldiers by the undemanding standards of deduct your own casualties from those of the enemy, and if the answer is a positive number, it was a glorious victory, school of applied warfare. But Rust's lack of any kind of military grasp was matched only by his high opinion of the talent he in fact possessed, only in negative amounts. It hadn't been Rust last time. He vaguely remembered some other dim captain. All these little changes, what would they add up to? I bet he's only just been made a captain, thought Vimes. Just think of the lives I could save by accidentally cutting his head off now. Look at those blue eyes. Look at that stupid curly moustache. And he's only going to get worse. Are you Keel? The voice was a bark. Yes, sir. I sent an order for you to come up here an hour ago, man. Yes, sir. I've been on duty all night and morning, and there's been rather a lot to attend to. I expect an order to be obeyed promptly, Sergeant. Yes, sir. So do I, sir. That's why discipline starts at the top, Sergeant. The men obey you, you obey me. I obey my superiors. Glad to hear it, sir. Rust had the same firm grip of common politeness, too. What is all that going on in the yard? Vimes steered according to the prevailing wind. A bit of morale building, sir. Instilling a bit of esprit de corps. And hit a reef. Rust raised his eyebrows. Why? He said. The men's job is to do what they are told, as is yours. A group hug is not part of the arrangement, is it? A bit of camaraderie helps the job along, sir, in my experience. Are you eyeballing me, Keel? No, sir. I am wearing an expression of honest doubt, sir. Eyeballing is 4 steps up, right after looking at you in a funny way, sir. By standard military custom and practice, sir, sergeants are allowed to go all the way up to an expression of acute, what's that pip over your stripes, man? Means sergeant at arms, sir. They were a special kind of copper. The captain grunted and glanced at the papers in front of him. Lord Winder has received an extraordinary request that you be promoted to lieutenant, Sergeant. It has come from Captain Swing of the Particulars. And his lordship listens to Captain Swing. Oh, and he wants you to be transferred to the Particulars. Personally, I think the man is mad. I'm 100% behind you there, sir. You do not wish to be a lieutenant? No, sir. Too long for Dick and too short for Richard, sir, said Vimes, focusing on the point a few inches above Rust's head. What? Neither one thing nor t'other, sir. Oh, so you'd like to be a captain, eh? Said Rust, grinning evilly. No, sir. Don't want to be an officer, sir. Get confused when I see more than one knife and fork on the table, sir. You certainly don't look like officer material to me, Sergeant. No, sir. Thank you, sir. Good old Rust. Good young Rust. The same unthinking rudeness masquerading as blunt speaking, the same stiff-neckedness, the same petty malice. Any sergeant worth his salt would see how to make use of that. Wouldn't mind transferring to the Particulars, though, sir, he volunteered. It was a bit of a gamble, but not much. Rust's mind was reliable. I expect you would like that, Keel, said Rust. No doubt you ran rings around that old fool Tilden and don't fancy the idea of a captain with his finger on the pulse, eh? No, you can damn well stay here, understand? Wonderful, thought Vimes. Sometimes it's like watching a wasp land on a stinging nettle. Someone's going to get stung and you don't care. Yes, sir, he said, eyes still staring straight ahead. Have you shaved today, man? Excuse shaving, sir, Vimes lied. Doctor's orders. Been sewn up on the face, sir. Could shave one half, sir. He remained at eye front, while Rust grudgingly stared at him. The cut was still pretty livid, and Vimes hadn't dared look under the patch yet. Hit yourself in the face with your own bell, did you? Grunted the captain. Vimes's fingers twitched. Very funny, sir, he said. Now go and get the men fell in, Keel. Look sharp. I shall inspect them in a moment. And tell that idiot with the flat nose to clear the stable. Sir? My horse will be arriving shortly. I don't want to see that disgusting screw in there. What? Turn out Marilyn, sir, said Vimes, genuinely shocked. That was an order. Tell him to jump to it. What do you want us to do with her, sir? I don't care. You are a sergeant, you've had an order. Presumably there are knacker men. People around here must eat something, no doubt. Vimes hesitated for a moment. Then he saluted. Right you are, sir, he said. Do you know what I saw on the way here, Sergeant? Couldn't say, sir, said Vimes, staring straight ahead. People were building barricades, Sergeant. Sir? I know you heard me, man. Well, it's to be expected, sir. It's happened before. People get jumpy. They hear rumours of mobs and out-of-control soldiers. They try to protect their street. It is a flagrant challenge to government authority. People can't take the law into their own hands. Well, yes, but these things generally run their course. My gods, man, how did you manage to get promoted? Vimes knew he should leave it at that. Rust was a fool. But at the moment he was a young fool, which is more easily excused. Maybe it was just possible, if caught early enough, that he could be upgraded to idiot. Sometimes it pays to, he began. Last night, every watch house in the city was mobbed, said Rust, ignoring him. Except this one. How do you account for that? His moustache bristled. Not being attacked was definite proof of Vimes's lack of moral fibre. It was just a case of, apparently a man attempted an assault on you. Where is he now? I don't know, sir. We bandaged him up and took him home. You let him go? Yes, sir. He was, but Rust was always a man to interrupt an answer with a demand for the answer he was in fact interrupting. Why? Sir, because at that time I thought it prudent to. 3 watchmen were killed last night. Did you know that? There were gangs roaming the streets. Well, martial law has been declared. Today we're going to show them a firm hand. Get your men together, now. Vimes saluted, turned about, and walked slowly down the stairs. He wouldn't have run for a big clock. A firm hand. Right. Gangs roaming the streets. Well, we sure as hell never did anything when they were criminal gangs. And when you've got madmen and idiots on either side and everything hangs in the balance, well, trouble is always easy to find when you have enough people looking for it. One of the hardest lessons of young Sam's life had been finding out that the people in charge weren't in charge. It had been finding out that governments were not, on the whole, staffed by people who had a grip, and that plans were what people made instead of thinking. Most of the watchmen were clustered around the stairs. Snouty was quite good at internal communications of the worrying kind. "Tidy yourselves, lads," said Vimes. "Captain will be down in a few minutes. Apparently it's time for a show of strength." "What strength?" said Billy Wiglet. "Oh, Billy, what happens is the vicious revolutionaries take one look at us and scuttle off back to their holes," said Vimes. He was immediately sorry he'd said that. Billy hadn't learned irony. "I mean, we just give the uniforms an airing," he translated. "We'll get cheesed," said Fred Colon. "Not if we stick together," said Sam. "Right," said Vimes. "After all, we're heavily armed men going on patrol among civilians who are, by law, unarmed. If we're careful, we shouldn't get too badly hurt." Another bad move. Dark sarcasm ought to be taught in schools, he thought. Besides, armed men could get into trouble if the unarmed civilians were angry enough, especially if there were cobblestones on the streets. He heard the distant clock strike 3. Tonight, the streets would explode. According to the history books, it would be one shot that did it, round about sunset. One of the foot regiments would be assembled in Hen and Chickens Field, awaiting orders. And there would be people watching them. Troops always drew an audience. Impressionable kids, the inevitable Ankh-Morpork floating street crowd, and, of course, the ladies whose affection was extremely negotiable. The crowd shouldn't have been there, people said afterwards. But where should they have been? The field was a popular spot. It was the only vaguely green space in that part of the city. People played games there, and of course there was always the progress of the corpse on the gibbet to expect. And the men were troops, ordinary foot soldiers, people's sons and husbands, taking a bit of a rest and having a drink. Oh, that was right. Afterwards, it was said that the troops were drunk, and that they shouldn't have been there. Yeah, that was the reason, Vimes reflected. No one should have been there. But they were. And when that captain got an arrow in his stomach and was groaning on the ground, some of the crossbowmen fired in the direction of the shot. That's what the history book said. They fired at the house windows where people had been watching. Perhaps the shot had come from one of them. Some arrows fell short. Some did not. And there were people who fired back. And then, one after another, horrible things would happen. By then, it was too late for them not to. The tension would unwind like a huge spring, siding through the city. There were plotters, there was no doubt about it. Some had been ordinary people who'd had enough. Some were young people with no money who objected to the fact that the world was run by old people who were rich. Some were in it to get girls. And some had been idiots as mad as swing, with a view of the world just as rigid and unreal, who were on the side of what they called the people. Vimes had spent his life on the streets and had met decent men and fools and people who'd steal a penny from a blind beggar and people who performed silent miracles or desperate crimes every day behind the grubby windows of little houses. But he'd never met the people. People on the side of the people always ended up disappointed in any case. They found that the people tended not to be grateful or appreciative or forward-thinking or obedient. The people tended to be small-minded and conservative and not very clever, and were even distrustful of cleverness. And so the children of the revolution were faced with the age-old problem. It wasn't that you had the wrong kind of government, which was obvious, but that you had the wrong kind of people. As soon as you saw people as things to be measured, they didn't measure up. What would run through the streets soon enough wouldn't be a revolution or a riot. It'd be people who were frightened and panicking. It was what happened when the machinery of city life faltered. The wheels stopped turning and all the little rules broke down. And when that happened, humans were worse than sheep. Sheep just ran. They didn't try to bite the sheep next to them. By sunset, a uniform would automatically be a target. Then it wouldn't matter where a watchman's sympathies lay. He'd be just another man in armour. What? He said, snapping back to the present. You all right, Sarge? Said Corporal Colon. Said Vimes as the real world returned. You were well away, said Fred, staring at nothing. You ought to have had a proper sleep last night, Sarge. There's plenty of time to sleep in the grave, said Vimes, looking at the ranks of the watch. Yeah, I heard that, Sarge, but no one wakes you up with a cup of tea. I got 'em lined up, Sarge. Fred had made an effort, Vimes could see. So had the men themselves. He'd never seen them looking quite so formal. Usually they had a helmet and breastplate apiece. Beyond that, equipment was varied and optional. But today, at least, they looked neat. Shame about the heights. No man could easily inspect a road that included Wiglet at one end and Nancy Ball at the other. Wiglet was so short that he'd once been accused of naveling a sergeant, being far too short to eyeball anyone, while Nancy Ball was always the first man on duty to know when it was raining. You had to stand well back to get both of them into vision without eye strain. Well done, lads, he managed, and heard Rust coming down the stairs. It must have been the first time the man had seen his new command in full. In the circumstances, he bore up quite well. He merely sighed. He turned to Vimes and said, I require something to stand on. Vimes looked blank. Sir? I wish to address the men in order to inspire them and stiffen their resolve. They must understand the political background to the current crisis. Oh, we all know about Lord Winder being a loony, sir, said Wiglet cheerfully. Frost nearly formed on Rust's forehead. Vimes drew himself up. Squad dismiss, he shouted, and then leaned towards Rust as the men scuttled away. A quiet word, sir. Did that man really say, Rust began. Yes, sir. These are simple men, sir, said Vimes, thinking quickly. Best not to disturb them, if you take my meaning. Rust inserted this into his range of options. Vimes could see him thinking. It was a way out, and it suited his opinion of the watch in general. It meant that he hadn't been cheeked by a constable, he'd merely dealt with a simpleton. They know their duty, sir, Vimes added for reinforcement. Their duty, Sergeant, is to do what they are told. Exactly, sir. Rust stroked his moustache. There is something in what you say, Sergeant. And you trust them? As a matter of fact, sir, yes. We will make a circuit of the surrounding streets in 10 minutes. This is a time for action. Reports are disturbing. We must hold the line, Sergeant. And he believes it, thought Vimes. He really does. The watchman marched out into the afternoon sunshine, and did so badly. They were not used to marching. Their normal method of progress was the stroll, which is not a recognised military manoeuvre, or the frantic withdrawal, which is. In addition, the convection currents of prudent cowardice were operating in the ranks. There was a definite sideways component to each man's progress as he sought to be in the middle. The watchmen had shields, but they were light wickerwork things intended to turn blows and deflect stones. They wouldn't stand up to anything with an edge. The advance, therefore, was by means of a slowly elongating huddle. Rust didn't notice. He had a gift for not seeing things he did not want to see and not hearing things he did not want to hear. But he could not ignore a barricade. Ankh-Morpork wasn't really a city, not when the chips were down. Places like Dolly Sisters and Knapp Hill and Seven Sleepers had been villages once, before they were absorbed by the urban sprawl. On some level, they still held themselves separate. As for the rest, well, once you got off the main streets, it was all down to neighbourhoods. People didn't move around much. When tension was high, you relied on your mates and your family. Whatever was going down, you tried to make sure wasn't going down your street. It wasn't revolution. It was quite the reverse. It was defending your doorstep. They were building a barricade in Whalebone Lane. It wasn't a particularly good one, being made up mostly of overturned market stalls, a small cart, and quite a lot of household furniture, but it was a symbol. Rust's moustache bristled. Right in our faces, he snapped. Absolute defiance of constituted authority, Sergeant. Do your duty. And what would that be at this point, sir? Said Vimes. Arrest the ringleaders, and your men will pull the barricade down. Vimes sighed. Very well, sir. If you will stand back, I shall seek them out. He walked up to the domestic clutter, aware of eyes watching him before and behind. When he was a few feet away, he cupped his hands. All right, what's going on here? He shouted. He was aware of whispering, and he was ready for what happened next. When the stone flew over the top of the furniture, he caught it in both hands. I asked a civil question, he said. Come on. There was more whispering. He distinctly heard, that's the sergeant from last night, and some sort of sotto voce argument. Then a voice shouted, Death to the fascist oppressors! This time the argument was more frantic. He heard someone say, oh, all right, and then, Death to the fascist oppressors, present company accepted. There, is everyone happy now? He knew that voice. Mr. Reginald Shue, is it? He said. I regret that I have only one life to lay down for Whalebone Lane, the voice shouted from somewhere behind a wardrobe. If only you knew, Vimes thought. I don't think that will be necessary, he said. Come on, ladies and gentlemen. Is this any way to behave? You can't take the law into your own hands. His voice faltered. Sometimes it takes the brain a little while to catch up with the voice. Vimes turned and looked back at the squad, who needed no prompting at all to hang back. And then he turned to look at the barricade. Where exactly was the law right now? What did he think he was doing? The job, of course, the one that's in front of you. He'd always done it. And the law had always been out there, but somewhere close. He'd always been pretty sure where it was, and it definitely had something to do with the badge. The badge was important. Yes. It was shield-shaped for protection. He'd thought about that in the long nights in the darkness. It protected him from the beast, because the beast was waiting in the darkness of his head. He'd killed werewolves with his bare hands. He'd been mad with terror at the time, but the beast had been there inside, giving him strength. Who knew what evil lurked in the hearts of men? Copper, that's who. After 10 years, you thought you'd seen it all, but the shadows always dished up more. You saw how close men lived to the beast. You realised that people like Casa were not mad. They were incredibly sane. They were simply men without a shield. They'd looked at the world and realised that all the rules didn't have to apply to them, not if they didn't want them to. They weren't fooled by all the little stories. They shook hands with the beast. But he, Sam Vimes, had stuck by the badge, except for that time when even that hadn't been enough and he'd stuck by the bottle instead. He felt as if he'd stuck by the bottle now. The world was spinning. Where was the law? There was the barricade. Who was it protecting from what? The city was run by a madman and his shadowy chums, so where was the law? Coppers like to say that people shouldn't take the law into their own hands, and they thought they knew what they meant. They were thinking about the normal times, and men who went round to sort out a neighbour with a club because his dog had crapped once too often on their doorstep. But at times like this, who did the law belong to? If it shouldn't be in the hands of people, where the hell should it be? People who knew better? Then you got Winder and his pals, and how good was that? What was supposed to happen next? Oh yes, he had a badge, but it wasn't his, not really. And he'd got orders and they were the wrong ones. And he'd got enemies for all the wrong reasons. And maybe there was no future. It didn't exist anymore. There was nothing real, no solid point on which to stand, just Sam Vimes where he had no right to be. It was as if his body, trying to devote as many resources as possible to untangling the spinning thoughts, was drawing those resources from the rest of Vimes. His vision darkened. His knees were weak. There was nothing but bewildered despair. And a lot of explosions. Havelock Vetinari knocked politely on the window of the little office just inside the Assassin's Guild main gate. The duty porter raised the hatch. "Signing out, Mr. Maroon," said the assassin. "Yes, sir," said Mr. Maroon, pushing a big ledger towards him. "And where are we off to today, sir?" "General reconnoitring, Mr. Maroon. Just generally looking around." "Oh, I said to Mrs. Maroon last night, sir, that you are a great one for looking around," said Maroon. We look and learn, Mr. Maroon. We look and learn, said Veterinary, signing his name in the book and putting the pen back in its holder. And how is your little boy? Thank you for asking, sir. He's a lot better, said the porter. Glad to hear it. Oh, I see the Honourable John Bleedwell is out on a commission. To the palace? Now, sir, said Maroon, grinning and waving a finger. You know I couldn't tell you that, sir, even if I knew. Of course not. Veterinary glanced at the back wall of the office, where, in an old brass rack, were a number of envelopes. The word active was inscribed at the top of the rack. Good afternoon, Mr. Maroon. Afternoon, sir. Good, looking around. He watched the young man walk out into the street. Then Maroon went into the cubbyhole next to the office to put the kettle on. He rather liked young Veterinary, who was quiet and studious and, it had to be said, a generous young man on appropriate occasions. But a bit weird all the same. Once Maroon had watched him in the foyer, standing still. That was all he was doing. He wasn't making any attempt at concealing himself. After half an hour, Maroon had wandered over and said, Can I help you, sir? And Veterinary had said, Thank you, no, Mr. Maroon. I'm just teaching myself to stand still. To which there wasn't really any sensible comment that could be made. And the young man must have left after a while, because Maroon didn't remember seeing him again that day. He heard a creak from the office and poked his head around the door. There was no one there. As he made the tea, he thought he heard a rustle from next door and went to check. It was completely empty. Remarkably so, he thought later on. It was almost as if it was even more empty than it would be if there was just, well, no one in it. He went back to his comfy armchair in the cubbyhole and relaxed. In the brass rack, the envelope marked Bleedwell, J, slid back slightly. There were a lot of explosions. The firecrackers bounced all over the street. Tambourines thudded, a horn blared a chord unknown in nature, and a line of monks danced and twirled around the corner, all chanting at the tops of their voices. Vimes, sagging to his knees, was aware of dozens of sandaled feet gyrating past and grubby robes flying. Rust was yelling something at the dancers, who grinned and waved their hands in the air. Something square and silvery landed in the dirt. And the monks were gone, dancing into an alleyway, yelling and spinning and banging their gongs. Wretched heathens, said Rust, striding forward. Have you been hit, Sergeant? Vimes reached down and picked up the silver rectangle. A stone clanged off Rust's breastplate. As he raised his megaphone, a cabbage hit him on the knee. Vimes stared at the thing in his hand. It was a cigar case, slim and slightly curved. He fumbled it open and read, To Sam, with love, from your Sybil. The world moved. But now Vimes no longer felt like a drifting ship. Now he felt the tug of the anchor pulling him round to face the rising tide. A barrage of missiles was coming over the barricade. Throwing things was an old Ankh-Morpork custom, and there was something about Rust that made him a target. With what dignity he could muster, he raised the megaphone again, got as far as, "I hereby warn you," before a stone spun it out of his hand. "Very well, then," he said, and marched stiffly back to the squad. "Sergeant Keel, order the men to fire. 1 round of arrows over the top of the barricade." "No," said Vimes, standing up. "I can only assume you've been stunned, Sergeant," said Rust. "Men, prepare to execute that order." "First man that fires, I will personally cut that man down," said Vimes. He didn't shout. It was a simple, confident statement of precisely what the future would hold. Rust's expression did not change. He looked Vimes up and down. "Is this mutiny, then, Sergeant?" said the captain. "No, I'm not a soldier, sir. I can't mutiny." "Martial law, Sergeant," snapped Rust. "It is official." "Really?" said Vimes, as another rain of rocks and old vegetables came down. "Shields up, lads." Rust turned to Fred Colon. "Corporal, you will put this man under arrest." Colon swallowed. "Me? You, Corporal. Now." Colon's pink face mottled with white as the blood drained from it. "But he began. "You won't? Then it seems I must," said the captain. He drew his sword. At that, Vimes heard the click of a crossbow's safety catch going off and groaned. He didn't remember this happening. "You just put that sword away, sir, please," said the voice of Lance Constable Vimes. "You will not shoot me, you young idiot. That would be murder," said the captain calmly. "Not where I'm aiming, sir." Bloody hell, thought Vimes. Maybe the lad was simple. Because one thing Rust wasn't was a coward. He thought idiot stubbornness was bravery. He wouldn't back down in the face of a dozen armed men. "Oh, I think I can see the problem, Captain," Vimes said brightly. "As you were, Lance Constable. There's been a slight misunderstanding, sir, but this should sort it out." It was a blow he'd remember for a long time. It was sweet. It was textbook. Rust went down like a log. In the light of all his burning bridges, Vimes slipped his hand back into his hip pocket. "Thank you, Mrs. Goodbody, and your range of little equalizers." He turned to the watchmen, who were a tableau of silent horror. "Let the record show Sergeant at Arms John Keel did that," he said. "Vimes, what did I tell you about waving weapons around when you're not going to use them?"
Oh my god.
That whole passage about like where was the law gets me every time. Like
Yeah, so good.
Yep. This fucking book. Fucking book. So good. So good. So good. I'm really, really looking forward to tomorrow night.
Yes.
oh shit. Yeah. Anyway.
Fall on a Friday. If this had been on a Friday, I would have been so angry.
Oh my god. I wonder, yeah, actually, hold on, let me have a look and let me see what's going to be on for Fridays.
Oh no, I think I do know what Friday is.
Tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Ooh. 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 Interesting.
Frankie soundboard.
Folks, gentle folks, let's say goodbye to the catch-up crew, and then I might say goodbye to you because I have a moose and two lovely people to spend some time with. So I think I'm going to go and put at least one of these things in my face. Catch-up crew, I love you. We all love you. I hope you're having a nice time. Get some chocolate mousse. It's in the air. Why not? Do it. Okay. Bye, catch-up crew. Bye, catch-up crew. Story time.